Hi guys, it's Arth. In this video I'll be ranking all 30 tracks in Mario Kart World. I've been playing the game for 7 months now, so I feel like I know the tracks well enough to state my opinions on them and rank them. Just note that I play both competitively and casually, but mainly competitively, which means these rankings will be heavily based on time trialing, shortcuts, techniques and how good they are online. Other stuff like the music and aesthetics are still important, but not as important as the former stuff. Without further ado, let's get into the ranking. I really didn't want to put Peach Beach this low, but it's had too much of a downgrade compared to versions from previous games, such as on Mario Kart Wii. I grew up with Mario Kart Wii, and I enjoyed racing on Peach Beach, even though I always took the left route with the boost panel, not knowing that it was slower. But the water provided at least some obstacle on a relatively simple track, which is where the World version flaws, as you can just drive on the water, which makes the optimal line a straight line, which is just boring. Not to mention that most of the track is straight lines. This is mainly due to the town section, which is a great concept, but I think it could have been executed a lot better than it has. Lap 3 is just painful, as it's just one turn and water, and I don't like water physics all too much in this game. Peach Beach isn't awful though, as I do enjoy the music with the boost in instrument choice compared to previous versions, but the main flaws regard the gameplay of the track, which is why it's in last place for me. With exactly the same reason as Peach Beach, Desert Hills has had a big downgrade since it was last on Mario Kart. The main problem is that the hills are gone. It's literally in the track name, and all we have now are sand moguls in one section of the track. The hills are what made a relatively simple track layout fun and kind of challenging at times. Another problem is that the pokies are gone. I get that they're a playable character in the game, but they were really iconic to this track. I do, however, like the new Toco Tocos that run down the track from lap 2. I do enjoy the last shortcut, however, which is what saves this track from being last place. I know lots of people online who don't like Starview Peak that much, and I tend to agree with them. In my first week of playing this game, I already didn't like it. That opinion hasn't changed at all, and my reasoning is the same. For starters, half of the track is water, and water physics aren't good in this game in my opinion. However, the charge jump shortcut involves skipping part of the water, and is actually very rewarding if done correctly. Another thing is that I feel like there's a lack of turns, or at least moments where I can perform satisfying mini turbos. However, the shortcut can be very fun to pull off online, which is why I've placed it above the other two tracks. Choco Mountain has also received a big downgrade from previous games. It looks completely unrecognisable, which is part of the reason why I don't like it too much. It just doesn't really feel like Choco Mountain to me. I do like the new rock version of the song, and I get that the metallic vibe of the track works better with the rock remix, but I'd have actually preferred it if they just had the old version of the track with the old song. The main problem this track has is that it's a heavy bagging track. All of the new molten chocolate can just be driven through with any speed item, making it extremely possible to make comebacks, which is why bagging is the predominant strategy used online. Another problem with this is that if a shock happens when trying to shroom through the molten chocolate, it completely ruins the entire race, creating more of a reason to stay back and get invincibility items. In 8 Deluxe, Choco Mountain favoured front running, the exact opposite to its version in World. These reasons make Choco Mountain a pretty bad track, and it just doesn't feel like the original. Koopa Troopa Beach definitely has the most simple track layout in the game. It's basically a circle and it's entirely left turns. This already makes it a boring track, but it's saved by a couple of things. Firstly, it's been increased to 5 laps to make it longer and like it was on the SNES. Also, the charge jump shortcut is very rewarding and fun to do, making this track at least somewhat interesting. I also really like the Palm Beach aesthetic of the area. However, it's still worse than most tracks, and just like Choco Mountain, the shock can utterly ruin someone's race due to the track still being one of the shortest. Bagging becomes a problem if the track can be completely ruined by the shock, as it just makes everyone try to get an invincibility item early on. However, Koopa Troopa Beach isn't the worst beach track in the game, and I would say it's slightly more balanced than Choco Mountain when it comes to strategy. It doesn't feel like much happens on Peach Stadium. It's one of the longest tracks in the game, and I don't find time trialing or online races that exciting. I think Starview Peak does have a similar issue, but I do like the variety of ways you can do the opening shortcut on Peach Stadium. I enjoy doing it with a feather with the rails, but it can just be easily done with a mushroom. But overall, I just don't think that the track is that interesting. That's all I have to say. Mario Bros. Circuit is a pretty good example of an introductory track. It introduces the rug running technique pretty well, but in my opinion that feels like that's all there is to the track. There are rails, but there isn't much wall riding. It's a pretty simple track layout overall and it feels a bit too overscaled. However, it's definitely better than other introductory tracks in Mario Kart, such as Wii Luigi Circuit, so I guess Mario Bros. Circuit being simple is necessary. It doesn't change the fact that the track is kinda boring. Crown City is definitely a better city track than any of the tour tracks, but I wouldn't say it's an outstanding track by any means. I will say, I think this being a rolling track was needed, as a city is obviously a big area, and it's cool that they used each section to showcase different parts of a city. However, like some cities, this track is kind of blocky regarding its turns, and the long straight can feel too long at times. However, I do enjoy the shortcut on the final section that uses 2 mushrooms or a feather, and the final tree cut is so satisfying to pull off and saves tons of time. I think the third section saves the track from being lower down the list. Cheep Cheep Falls is an interesting track. Online races on Cheep Cheep Falls can either go extremely well or extremely bad, and it all depends on whether you have mushrooms to complete the final shortcuts. The final 2 shortcuts feel way too overpowered, as if you don't have mushrooms on lap 3 and you're in first, chances are you'll lose many spots. This makes bagging feel like the only viable strategy on this track, and it essentially doesn't matter what you do in the race, just as long as you have a speed item on lap 3. Additionally, about half the track is on water, which is already a downside as I'm not a fan of the game's water physics. It's what makes it the track I'm the worst at. Negatives aside, I absolutely love the Japanese aesthetic. It might be top 5 in the game for how the track looks. And also, while the final shortcut can be annoying if not done, when it is done, it's a very satisfying way to end the race. Bagging isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially if done right. Just look at Cheeseland from 8 Deluxe. I love the concept that Nintendo thought of, combining Mario Circuits 1, 2 and 3 from Super Mario Kart to make the Mario Circuit we see in Mario Kart World. I also love how the track looks now, even though it doesn't look an awful lot different, I can't really explain it. However, there seems to be a lack of the new techniques. Also, the 3 tracks that are a part of it are very scaled down, making this the shortest track in the game by far. This has its positives and negatives. What I don't like about this is that sometimes it feels too short when I think that there's more to the track. Maybe it would have been better if they added Mario Circuit 4 as a final section, as we haven't had a remake of it, but I'm not too sure. I can't really have an opinion on something that doesn't exist, so I'm not sure how good of a change that would be. However, the scale down has made this track feel more balanced on a strategy viewpoint. Mario Circuit 3 on 8 Deluxe was a track where bagging was the viable strategy due to the massive patches of off-road. But the track now being scaled down, and some off-road patches shrinking, have made both bagging and front-running viable online. I love it when a track is balanced like this. From what I've heard from others about Dandelion Depths, I think it's a pretty underrated track. I've still put it pretty low, due to the fact that there isn't much rail or wall riding, and the fastest path is the alternate paths that are the least interesting to drive on. However, I love how the underground cave looks with the luminescent water, the biddy buds and of course the dandelions. Speaking of the water, this is my favourite section of the track to play, funnily enough, as getting tricks from the water and off of the edge of the water is tricky to get right and is pretty fun to do. Another thing I like about Dandelion Depths is the music. The music for this track is my favourite out of all of the Nitro tracks, besides Rainbow Road obviously, and I think that the music fits really well with the vibe of the track. Boost Cinema has, in my opinion, the best concept for a track in the entire game. Taking the concept of a cinema is already a cool idea, but jumping into a cinema screen is such a great direction of this concept. I also like the movie tapes that we drive on when in the movie screen. However, besides the concept, Boost Cinema does have a few negatives that I'd like to discuss. One of them is that it feels like it doesn't fit with the open world concept of the whole game. Although I will give it to Nintendo, they did the best they could with this cool concept of a cinema, and I love the idea of having the Ghost Valley tracks in the outside section of the area. When it comes to the actual gameplay, there is only one section of off-road, and there aren't nearly as many cool shortcuts as on other tracks. This makes running a viable strategy, although bagging can still be possible, and I have a YouTube short on a comeback I made with a bullet bill on this track. A final positive I'll add is that I love the music change when you jump into the cinema screen. Just like Boost Cinema, I think the concept for DK Spaceport is really good. I love the nod to the original Donkey Kong game on the NES, the game that started this entire franchise. I'm honestly surprised we haven't seen a track with this concept sooner. I like the unique strategies for each section, each providing their own sort of challenge. However, the main issue I have with this track is that there is a grass cut possible after every single section. This means that players with speed items have a big advantage, as they can easily overtake shroomless players in one corner. Another problem is that the Donkey Kong concept makes the track just straight lines and hairpins for every section, except for the first one. This makes it a pretty boring layout, although it is saved by the previously mentioned unique sections. There may be some bias here, as I love Mario Kart Wii, but I actually enjoy racing on Toad's Factory Mario Kart World. The music is still extremely epic as it was on the Wii, and it's one of my favourite soundtracks in the entire game. I really like the conveyor belt section because where the item boxes, coins and green path is located are all important to how you drive in this section. I also like the addition of the crane rails at the end, as they can be very helpful when avoiding the chaos. Despite this, a big flaw with this track is that with 24 players, the chaos of this track can sometimes be too much. The confined space and narrow walls in certain parts with 24 players using items can make the track really unplayable at times. This is one of the reasons that makes this a bagging track, as having an invincibility item on lap 3 is vital in avoiding the chaos. Another thing that makes this a bagging track is the end cut, that used to be a lake on the Wii, but is now a mud cut that saves a decent amount of time. When I heard that Moo Moo Meadows was coming back in Mario Kart World, I'll admit I wasn't that excited. We had it on the Wii 8 and 8 Deluxe, and it wasn't that good at all on any of these games. It was too simple, there weren't enough shortcuts, not many cows, and overall a boring track. However, it has received a much needed glow up. It still has a pretty simple track layout, but there are now more places to trick with certain elevated parts of the ground. There are also more shortcuts that are all pretty fun to do, and there are more cows. There's even a shortcut where you bounce off of a cow at the start of the lap, which is very funny and really satisfying to do. However, the tree shortcut is pretty inconsistent. I think I may have completed it once, and the addition of the new shortcuts have turned Moo Moo Meadows into a bagging track. Feels like I've said that a lot. When it used to be a running track. There isn't much bias here as I didn't like it on the Wii, but this version is miles better. When I played the game for the first time, my first experience of Rainbow Road was euphoric. Flying up to Rainbow Road from Peach Stadium for the first time is a moment I'll never forget, and the first thing I noticed was how uniquely awesome each of the 4 sections are. The first section is a good start to the track. I love the crystally vibe of the second section. The space station is designed really well, and the 4th section has an amazing opening and my favourite song in the entire game. These were all of my thoughts when I played the track for the first time. However, as I've played the track more and more, I've started to like it less and less. The main issue is that the track can drag a bit, as at 4 minutes it's by far the longest track in the game. And with this duration, you'd think there would be rails and walls to ride, but there is literally nothing. The length of the track also means the first half of the race doesn't really matter all too much. However, I still think it's a really magical track, which is why it isn't lower. We're now moving on to the tracks that I pick the most frequently when playing online, and at the bottom of these tracks I have Wario Shipyard. Just a side note, over here in Britain the track is actually called Wario's Galleon, but I always call it Wario Shipyard because I just prefer the name, so I'll be calling it Wario Shipyard in this video. Anyway, Wario Shipyard is the track in the game with by far the most water, so you would assume that this should be lower, as I don't like water physics that much. While the latter is true, with a few of the new shortcuts being added, you actually don't drive on the water that much. Not only that, these shortcuts are really good to pull off. The rock and palm tree shortcut saves so much time and can actually be chained into a pole trick to skip the sand section if a mushroom is timed right. The ropes after the cannon are not only good for avoiding chaos, but you also get 4 coins out of it. However, I will say that this track is a nightmare to time trial sometimes. I think Whistle Stop Summit utilises rails really well. Using train tracks as trickable rails is a great idea, and these are a vital part of what makes this track good. The alternating paths and various different rails create a lot of strategies on each lap, especially on time trials where coins disappear. It feels like there are numerous ways to do each bit of the track. However, I guess this is a bit of a skill issue, but I'm not very good at the track, especially the final shortcut, which I've done about 2% of the time. I know it isn't really a valid reason to dislike a track, but it can be unenjoyable at times due to this reason, and I enjoy the 12 tracks I have put above this more. This is why we should have had Wario's Goldmine in the game. But still, Whistle Stop Summit is a very well designed track, and I can't deny that the final shortcut is satisfying and vital when completed. I was really hoping Dino Dino Jungle was going to be in Mario Kart World, because I don't own Double Dash or 7. And I really like it in Mario Kart World. It's one of the 2 tracks in the game that I would say I'm the best at. Firstly, I will say that I love the new remix of the song, which I like to call Jurassic Rock. I think it fits the track extremely well. The dinosaurs are so iconic to this track. I particularly love the addition of the green dinosaur that you can drive up like a rail. The part of the track that people talk about the most is the grass shortcut, as it is a massive time save. It makes bagging a very viable strategy on this track, as you can be screwed if you don't take this shortcut. However, what makes me put Dino Dino Jungle above other tracks with a really big shortcut is that you can perform the shortcut with a feather, meaning you can sometimes risk front running to try and get a feather and take the shortcut. I've done this online twice before to win on Dino Dino Jungle when front running. This is why I prefer Dino Dino Jungle to other bagging tracks. 1 month into playing Mario Kart World, Drybones Burnout was actually my favourite track. There are a few things I love about it. Firstly, I love the Day of the Dead theme of the track. The area is beautiful to look at. When it comes to the actual gameplay, I love the second half of the track where all of the shortcuts come in a sequence one after the other. The lava helps with making this track somewhat difficult, but also creating these shortcuts at the end. One problem with this bit at the end is that the final item set is way too early. This basically means that target shocks are extremely likely, and it's possible to ruin one's race very quickly. Also, the first half of the track is pretty simple compared to the second half. This track is still great, but it isn't my favourite anymore. I digress, but I'll start by saying that I really want to live in Acorn Heights. I love the environment and the variety of accommodations. It's the track I'd want to live in the most. Anyway, Acorn Heights is a very fun track to race on, and the aesthetics have something to do with it. Not only do the rails look like vines, but there are also a lot of them, and they are a part of what makes this track extremely fun to race online. The options you have for which rail is better to take is dependent on your items and the overall chaos of the race, and it's good that there are a lot of good options. Speaking of, the mud cut might have the most possible ways to do it than any other shortcut in the game. It can be done with or without a mushroom, which makes the track pretty balanced strategy-wise. I love the vines at the end. They save a lot of time, but they can feel dangerous at times as everyone tries to take them. But overall, Acorn Heights is a great track. Sky High Sunday is the track that I would say I'm the best at in Mario Kart World. I consistently place highly in it online, and it's the only track in the game where I've been within 3 seconds of the world record. I'm currently at a 3.03 second difference. I believe this track was originally made for Mario Kart World because of all of the new techniques, but Nintendo wanted to showcase it early on Tour and 8 Deluxe. So I wouldn't say it got a glow up, just that they couldn't make it fun in the previous games. In fact, it was one of the worst tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but I can say it is much, much better in Mario Kart World. Every single technique on this track is fun to do. The opening rail sequence, the mushroom cut through the chocolate, the rail switch, and the wall ride cut at the end of the lap. However, it is still just an oval with 2 turns, so it is a boring track layout, and there are still parts with just tricking, although the coin placements do make this part challenging. Shy Guy Bazaar is another track where the theming makes it very fun to race on. I absolutely adore the Middle Eastern market vibe. There are also rails all over the place, and most of them have at least some value online. The ropes at the start can be difficult to get on when racing online, but it's very good at saving time as you skip the market section. The sharp turns in the middle of the lap add more challenge to the track, as these can be actually very difficult to master. The ropes before the glider are very useful as you can get 3 coins and a boost panel. I love how you can end the lap on the red rail to easily get onto the ropes to start the next lap. However, this is where many players can make a comeback by using a speed item through the sand, which is when target shocks usually happen. Salty Salty Speedway takes the cake for the track that has risen up my rankings the most since I first got the game. At first, I thought the track was just okay. I loved the seaside town vibe of the track, and I still do, but the track had a lot of flowing water, which was pretty difficult to manoeuvre at times. However, as time went on and I got better at the game, I now realised that this track is actually amazing. There are so many cool shortcuts on this track, including the wall trick onto the edge, the trick onto the rail, and of course, the pillar and tree shortcut, which is a top 5 shortcut in the whole game for me. I always have fun racing on Salty Salty Speedway. The reason it's in 7th is because the final shortcut can very easily be the most annoying experience ever. Airship Fortress shouldn't be this good, being predominantly 90-degree turns, but it's a great track. It might be a fan favourite on every single game it's been on. Airship Fortress uses its rails fantastically. Even though everyone goes for them online, the rails at the start are great for speed, and the rail switch is much quicker than just driving normally. The spiral is an iconic part of the track, and it's difficult to do it the fastest way consistently every time, but I remember to stop drifting at the 5th light. I also love the spiral because of the bullet bill extension that can be done online. It's very helpful to know if a shock ever happens. The main thing I like about Airship Fortress is that there is off-road, but there isn't too much so to make it a bagger. It's pretty balanced between running and bagging, whilst also having a satisfying shortcut right at the end. Faraway Oasis is so fun to drive on. The track feels like it flows very nicely when racing in time trials and online. One of the highlights of the track for me is the roll and sign sequence before hitting the water. When I did it for the first time, it was so satisfying, and I still feel the same satisfaction every time I do it. I love all of the different ways to do the section afterwards. The safest option is to trick forward on the right hand rail and trick onto the top platform, which is what I tend to do in time trials. But there's also the shortcut over the boxes that involves tricking off the rail early and hopping over the grass thanks to the water. This is the one time I like water in this game, by the way. While the ending shortcut can make it feel like bagging is more viable, the shortcut can also be done with a feather at a similar speed, making the track more balanced. Oh, also, I love the Savannah theme of the track, although I wish there was higher biodiversity. This is easily the best ever Bowser's Castle. That I've played at least. I haven't played DS Bowser's Castle. What immediately made this track amazing is the biggest shortcut in the entire game regarding time saving. The rail wall sign sequence is extremely fun and important to do online as it saves 3 to 4 seconds, and there are so many ways to do it as well. The increased speed in the sky section was a wise choice to make the track even more insane. The wall cut at the start of this section is quite challenging, so sometimes players don't go for it, which is why it's amazing to do it in an online race. Another thing I love about this track is that there are so many places where a mushroom can be used, due to the lava, all of which are extremely helpful when racing online. Me and a lot of Mario Kart World players would have never expected DK Pass to be as good as it is in Mario Kart World. I originally had this track around the middle of my rankings before any of the shortcut discoveries, but the shortcuts are what make this track absolutely amazing. Before I knew about the wall ride shortcut, the pole gap jump was very fun to do as a beginner, so there are a few ways to take this section of the track. The highlight of the track for me though has to be the tree shortcut. It is actually very difficult to do it without losing top speed, but extremely rewarding when done correctly. This shortcut was a big part of what made me love DK Pass in this game. Although the end shortcut is impossible shroomless, it isn't as bad as other ending shortcuts we have. Warrior Stadium is very exhilarating. It feels like something is happening every single millisecond of this track in online races. Firstly, the walls and rails surrounding the track make a lot of shortcuts possible, such as the opening corner cut or the bit before the ramp where you can get 6 coins. It feels like there is so much you can do on this track. I think the final corner is perfectly designed, as you actually want to drift at the previous turn but you don't want to release a mini turbo. It's difficult to time right and can go very badly if released at the wrong time. Finally, the music is epic as always. and I'm happy that they simplified the track from the original one on the N64. I think it would have been too long if they hadn't. Wario Stadium may be great, but there is one track I prefer. Some of you could probably guess this, but Great Question Block Ruins is my favourite track in Mario Kart World. There's a lot I'd love to talk about it. I'll start with the theme. I love the mossy and old ruins vibe of the track. The giant eroded question block is very cool, the patterns on the road are extremely cool, and I love that the track is in the sky. I feel like it fits better with the open world theme in the sky. Also, the shortcuts that this track has are so cool. The opening shortcut through the grass saves a ton of time, and can be chained with the rail on the next platform. The pillar and ring shortcut has to be a contender for the best one in the game. It's so satisfying to pull off in time trials and online. The final grass cut could have been a problem, but instead, it can be done shroomless by chaining the ring shortcut with hitting a box and taking a really fast line without any speed item. This is why this track is my favourite. It has a great mix of amazing shortcuts and balanced strategy. I would argue it is one of the tracks with the best shortcuts and the most balanced strategies. And there we go. Hope you guys liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one.